And so I myself am a CPTSD survivor. About 10 years ago, I actually finally reached out for help and got EMDR therapy and started to heal that. Right now in construction, if you look at the statistics, 25% of the workforce is actively in a mental health crisis. So one out of every four people on the job site, every job site in America, are actively contemplating either ending their life or they're deep into clinical depression, anxiety, some of those factors that really lead to.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zalle. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Good morning. Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operating executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I am your host, Michael Zalle. I'm the founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Joining us today is Josh Vitale. It says Joshua, but it's Josh. I know him.
It's Josh.
He's an entrepreneur, a writer, a former high voltage lineman turned into strategic fire starter. He is also a co-founder and CEO of a wonderful organization that is called Project Built. It's a nonprofit organization. I am honored to be on his board of directors as helping as much as I possibly can because I love what he's doing. He is focused around construction and uplifting the workforce and addressing mental health, addiction, suicide prevention, burnout, and other things that cause challenges to the workers in the industry. Josh's mission is to end the silence, heal the culture, and save lives in the construction community. You know, we're tackling what many people consider to be an impossible task, and I am happy to be part of that with him. And we're working to eliminate death by suicide within the sector because it is an unusually high number, and frankly, it's one of those things that people don't talk enough about. This episode, we're going to explore a few things and going down the rabbit hole on mental health, holistic health, EHS, bravado, and having this culture of not talking about these types of things. We're going to talk about addiction and suicide, of course, but we're also going to talk about integrating wellness programs and the positive things that people are doing and how we're going to find a path to give people the access to a healthier, more constructive and prosperous workforce. And most importantly, we're going to take some of the things away from the stigma and the mental health bravado that people put in the construction industry. So we today are going to dive in and we're going to learn a lot about something that we don't talk about a lot on this podcast, and I am delighted to be doing it. So thank you, Josh, to be with us.
Oh yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm actually just elated to be here and excited to talk to you as always.
Thanks, buddy. Well, before we get going, I want to hear a little bit about your story, your journey, both in the mental health but also the construction world. I found out just a moment ago that you grew up being a fan of folk music and having a father who loved the culture of the Bob Dylans and other folk musicians. And so I want to hear about your journey and also tell us about the folk concert you're going to this in next week or two.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Mike. So I guess I'll lead with the chin as I try to instruct other people to do. So, I've been in the construction business my whole life. I grew up as the child of a guy, my stepdad, who was a drywall contractor. And so, my mornings and evenings were like loading boxes of mud into the garage and cleaning out bazooka in the front yard with a hose. And so, the construction industry has been a huge part of my life from the beginning. And one of the things that I learned from him was that he wasn't going to be around much. So a lot of my connection to him came through digging through his record boxes, and that's where I discovered like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Judy Collins and all of those wonderful musicians that came out of the 60s, but I think it gave me my revolutionary spirit a little bit too. So we're actually headed up to Colorado with my wife and my daughter and my daughter's boyfriend here next week to go to the folk festival up in Lyon, and so we're super excited about that.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic trip, man. And getting out of 115 degrees in Phoenix is just what the doctor ordered, I'm sure.
Yeah, they put the stage right next to the river, so you can actually listen to the music while you're knee deep in a nice, cool river bath.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I might be joining you. I wish I could, buddy. I wish I could.
Right? I'm gonna try to stay up water of the hippies, though. I don't want to end up with whatever they're putting in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. So, tell us about your journey in on the construction side. So your father was a drywaller, or your stepfather, and you were in construction your whole life. Tell me about that. Like, when did you get into it? In what capacity? You were, obviously in electrical, as you stated in your bio, and I just want to hear about it, and also your personal journey with your family and kids and your life.
So I went to college. My drywaller dad said, "Don't you dare do this for a living. You're too smart. Don't suffer your whole life being a contractor. It's no way to live." So it was always he was adamant that I go to college, and I went to NAU after finishing high school in Payson, and I lasted a couple of years, but it just wasn't for me. I didn't fit. I didn't love it, and so I was looking for a way out. And my mom had remarried a gentleman that was a lineman. So he got me on with Asplund as a tree trimmer at first. So I dropped out of school, went to work for Asplund. I was the lumberjack for a year because he had told me, look, if you want to come do this lineman thing, you're a college boy, so you're not ready for it. You're going to have to go get a real job and see if you can actually work for a living before I'll get you an apprenticeship. So I went and worked for Asplund for a year, climbed trees and learned how to run a chainsaw and all that good stuff. And then after about a year of doing that, he got me on with the IBW here in Phoenix, Arizona, local 769, and I did my apprenticeship through them and became a lineman. And then I worked for about 10 years as a journeyman lineman. I think if you show up on time in construction and you actually put, your effort into it, they made me a foreman before I'd even topped out. So I was running crews that had, like the linemen on the crews were in their 40s and 50s. And here I am, a 22, 23-year-old kid trying to tell them what to do. So I had to learn how to lead without that compliance sort of mindset. I had to figure out how to motivate people and get them aligned with the mission, and bribe them, do whatever I had to do to get them to do what we were trying to do, because most of the time linemen, you try to tell them what to do and they're going to do the opposite. So um it was trial by fire, and I got really really into learning about like leadership capital and how to motivate people in it. So I've been a student of that really my entire life, and so that's helped to lead kind of what we're doing now. Most recently, I was working for an electrical EPC national, as the vice president of transmission and distribution, and traveling a ton. It was a huge stressor on the family. Amy and I um, had some struggles. We were trying to get pregnant. So this is back in 2021, and I'm on the road all the time. We're struggling to connect when I come home. We're struggling to connect when I'm away, and just the amount of stress that put on our relationship and our family was really really difficult to handle. And then I got stranded at Yellowtail Dam up on the Wyoming Montana border. I was driving out a transmission line, and it was like kind of towards the end of winter, and I had a like a I don't know 3/4 ton truck that I was driving, and I got marooned on a snowdrift out in the middle of nowhere, probably 40-50 miles from the nearest like highway. um and I got stuck. And so, no radio, no phone service, and I was marooned out there in the middle of nowhere. So, it turns out I started hiking out of this spot where I got stuck, and then a blizzard blew in and it snowed about 3 feet. So I went back to the truck, hunkered down for the night. Luckily, I had my snow gear with me. Um, but during that time, Amy and my sister and my mom were calling police, and they scrambled the the authorities, and they sent the search and rescue out from Billings, Montana, which is a 3.5 hour trip to get to where they could unload the snowcat to try to drive it to where I was at. Um, but anyway, so I'm hunkered down in the truck. I had a split pack with 250 gallons of diesel, so I would have been fine. But my whole family's panicking, and the Airbnb host that I was staying with had just had a hip replacement, and he's driving around looking for me, and it was a whole to do. So anyway, I hiked out about 7 miles that morning once the snow had lifted, and then got found by the ranger, and got out of there, and everything was fine, and I was safe. But that scare really kind of changed our perspective on being away and being on the road. And then when I got back from that trip, I got an offer to do that project here for Intel in Chandler, which was going to be, driving to the same spot, being home every night. And I was like, I don't know anything about semiconductors. I'm not sure that that's a good fit for me. But Amy said, I don't care what it is, you're taking the job. So
I understand. I
yeah,
understand.
that's how I ended up working here in Arizona for the last 3 years, and now we're doing what we're doing now.
But are originally from Payson and you're from Arizona. And so you were always, from a family perspective, they were here. You were just not here. But from a family perspective, you've always been based here locally, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm an Arizona guy.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome. Very few people can say that, by the way. Including myself. I'm about 7 years in, and I was originally from California, and I was a native Californian, multi-generation, and there are very few people can say that as well. So I do absolutely understand what it's like to feel like everybody is from somewhere else, and you're like, no, I'm from here. So
Yeah. I think Arizona brings people in that either, come from cold weather or they're running from the law.
yeah, well, or both. Well, you've just given a really good reason to not live in cold weather with that story. By the way, thank you for the honesty and, the vulnerability of that story, because I find one of the most refreshing things about you, Josh, is you will tell the story from a real perspective. And I appreciate that, in the scare and the being stranded and realizing that your marriage was not doing well and that you were struggling in balancing travel and all these things, which, by the way, in our industry, especially in safety, where you travel so much and you're going and doing all this work in the field and all these things, that it puts a strain on relationships. It really does. And I appreciate that you talk about that openly, and it's very important. So along those lines, tell us about your journey into, you're at the Intel facility, you're doing the build out, you're with this organization that cares a lot about the community and the workers, and you basically create a program that's, I think, is the beginning of the journey that you're on. And so I want to hear about that, both your experience in that journey, but then also what you're doing and what I'm, in my own little way, helping you accomplish in the project built, and what we're trying to accomplish there. But mostly I want to hear about the journey first, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I was on a project that had, at its peak, 7,500 workers ish. We close to 40 million man hours. And so, when you're dealing with something of that magnitude, there is, right now in construction, if you look at the statistics, there 25% of the workforce is actively in a mental health crisis. So one out of every four people on the job site, every job site in America, are actively, contemplating either ending their life, or they're deep into clinical depression, anxiety, some of those factors that really lead to, and thinking of it from the EHS lens, and your listeners, I'm sure, are interested in that, because you know what we noticed from a safety perspective is that there's people out there that are working on those jobs that don't have the working memory to even access what our safety policies are. The incidents that we see a lot of times are just total lapses of judgment, or we talk about risk tolerance a lot, right? And we can't expect people to have a high risk tolerance if they don't even value their own life. And so to me, the intersection between what we were trying to accomplish from an EHS perspective and what was going on that show up as lagging indicators with suicide, with opioid addiction and overdose, those lagging indicators that show us that the system is broken. And so I myself am a CPTSD survivor. So about 10 years ago, I actually finally reached out for help and got EMDR therapy and started to heal that, which has led me to this. But yeah.
So acronyms. So tell me about you're a survivor of CPESD.
CPTSD. So that's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the difference between PTSD and CPTSD is simple. PTSD is one event, right? Like you're the pilot of an F-16 and the F-16 goes down and now you're tormented by the trauma that you've experienced because you haven't gotten past that moment. And CPTSD is like that, but it comes from repeated traumatic events over a long period of time. So an abusive childhood might lead you to that, or like long-term bullying, or something where the trauma shows up over and over and over again. And being the child of addicts, alcoholics, abuse, that kind of thing can lead to CPTSD, which was in my case what had happened. So what was the other acronym?
Actually, it was the type of treatment that you said that you had undergone, and there was an acronym for it.
Sure. Yeah. EMDR is the modality. And so think of it like this. The way that it was explained to me is that in our minds, right, or in our brains, we have, memories, and they're connected. And typically we process those in our sleep during our REM sleep, right? So what's happening during REM sleep is where our eyes are moving back and forth. And so EMDR therapy sort of combines hypnosis with the use of eye movement to try to reprocess those memories and just put them into the memory bank instead of constantly repeating. So for me, the way that my CPTSD showed up was I had a constant sense of dread. I would had night terrors all the time. I would be waking up in the middle of the night thinking that I was under attack. And so never getting a good night's sleep, which then of course leads to all sorts of knock-on effects and stress and anxiety and depression. And over 20 years that led to suicidal ideation. So I lived with suicidal ideation for about 15 years, to where I would rather die than continue my life the way that it was. And so once I was able to get help, it was like a door that opened that I could step through and sort of let that stuff go and realize that it was just the past. Like, it doesn't disappear, but it's no longer controlling your present. And so it was transformational for me to experience, that kind of healing through that therapy. And I've recently discovered that really the hypnosis piece is probably the one piece that really does work. The research has moved in a direction that it's not necessarily the eye movement, but the self hypnosis and the processing of those memories that really does give people the transformation that heals.
Well, first, I just have to thank you for communicating that story. It's very vulnerable of you. It's very kind of you. I honestly think a lot of people, especially men of our age, won't talk about this stuff. And it's kind of funny you say that. And I think people's life experiences comes out all differently. I'm a big advocate and I speak a lot on disability. And as you know, I have one hand and I was born this way. And I to a large degree, wear it as a badge of honor, and that I've been able to accomplish and do the things that I've been able to accomplish. But there are long-term impacts of those things, and there are things that you carry with you that may or may not ever be addressed. I only look at the positive, but there's a lot of negative that also how you cope comes into play. And the bull in the china shop, and the I could do anything, which means in my early days, you can't tell me not to do anything. and that can come out in a really hard way. Learning how to deal with that and process that is an important part of being a human being and being an adult, and being able to teach good processes and values and things. So I'm really proud that you're willing to talk about that, and that this is what you're doing as you've gone through this. You can actually relate to the people we're trying to help on the Project Built mission. And so along those lines, tell me about what we're doing here in Project Built, and specifically what the mission is. And eventually we'll talk about also what the ask might be if we can get people to support us in some way. But most importantly, what are we doing here? And what are you doing here? I'm just here to help support your mission. So,
Well, thank you. And, knowing you and having a friendship with you has been inspiring to me too, what you've been able to accomplish. And the way that you show up with your positive energy is something that inspires me to continue doing what I'm doing and lead with vulnerability and talk about the tough things. It is hard, and it takes practice. Like I'm not good at it now. I was really bad at it when I first started. And I was convinced that if I let anybody in, to that vulnerable space, that I would be shunned, or, people would finally see the weakness in me, and then I wouldn't be able to get ahead in life. And so it is scary, and I think as leaders we have to model that vulnerability so we can open a container for other people to start to share theirs. And I think when we do that, I think that's why you see when you get in front of a crowd and you talk about things that are vulnerable and you share that authentic story that you have, people stop talking, they pay attention. It's like a magic spell. Vulnerability is really, I think, one of our most powerful tools, and it's so underutilized. So hopefully guys like you and I can do a good job of getting out there and talking about things that are tough that we've been through, and that'll open the door for other people to share what they've been through. So Project Built, you know, um, I was working for a GC, and there's only so much you can do from that space. I'm the chair of Construction Suicide Prevention Week, which is another national nonprofit that raises awareness for suicide prevention. We celebrate a week in September, and last year we had 500,000 participants, 750 companies in all 50 states and 4 territories. So that's a movement that's growing and gaining traction, which is wildly important. I'm also the chair of the Arizona Workforce Wellness Alliance, which is, for the first time in Arizona history, the workforce is going to get recognized along with veterans and youth for suicide prevention in the state's national plan for suicide prevention. So, we're gaining some traction, but as I was a part of these groups, what I realized is that there's a lot of work that was going into awareness and not a ton of actual boots on the ground work that was being done. And I'm a doer, you know what I mean? I'm a builder. I gotta get my hands dirty. When I was at my last position, I did probably 2 dozen suicide interventions for folks that were on our project. And that was, it was tough, right? It was really tough at first. It's still tough every time. But what I realized was that there is a glaring need for having people that are intentionally in place to take care of people that are in crisis. And so, what Project Built was created for and continues to do is to try to solve the problem, and not just from a boots on the ground lens, but we're trying to do it from the top down as well. And so that's why guys like you, CEOs of companies that lead people, it's important to have you as the conversation. So we formed a council of folks all over the nation to get together to really discuss, the ecology of construction work, and what makes us unique in our challenges, but also in our abilities. And then, how we can connect the dots and really understand construction as a whole. If we look at the models that exist, currently for workplace and wellness, nobody's ever looked at anything like construction, right? The transient nature of it, the fact that you might have 20, 30, up to 100, 200 companies coming together to try to collaborate in an environment that's dangerous, the amount of stress that goes involved in that, the ergonomics of it all, right? So there's all of these factors that come into play like a spider web. And so for the first time in history, we're trying to put together a group that's going to look at all of that. And so that's what you're graciously a part of, which is us trying to wrangle, a bunch of very busy, very, very awesome folks and, thought leaders and PhDs and CEOs of companies and, all those folks to get together to really to do the work of identifying what those interconnected systems are and how they relate to each other so that we can, somehow find a way to do some positive good for the construction industry.
So from a measurement perspective and kind of what, I know you're doing a retreat and I want to talk about that because we're putting together, a fund to help families that have been impacted by this. And that's coming up here. But more important, well, equally as important. So when you look at this as a nationwide right now, hopefully eventually international, but right now a nationwide endeavor, you've got 750 companies that have been involved in the national program, but now we're trying to do it at a ground level. How are you looking at the outcomes and the measurements that we and you can take to organizations to get support? How are we looking at how that's going to happen, like tactically? It's always easy strategically saying, well, we want to lower the suicide rate. We want to lower the, big picture, we want to know the outcomes. You always have to know the outcomes. But what are the things that you hope to accomplish over the next year or two to help us get there?
Yeah. So, you talk about measurement and luckily I don't have to figure that out. We've got great folks like, PhDs, my cousin Haley Trimboli and Reka Lassu from the University of Pepperdine. And we've got the Delhi Web School here at ASU. And hopefully we can get their professors and people involved that can help us to figure out the measurement piece. But ultimately, we have to set these KPIs, right, as we build out what we're going to do so the companies have something to look at. But, pulse surveys, I think, are a great way to do that. You mentioned the family retreat, and that was one injection point or inflection point where Amy and I, and Amy is my wife and co-founder of Project Built, we felt like we were uniquely positioned because of our lived experience to actually do some good in the community. And like I said, boots on the ground, get our hands dirty and get in there and help people. So we're going to have 10 families out in 2026 to a 5-day retreat that's curated with couples therapists and individual therapists and family therapists and child-led activities, and give this group of 10 families an opportunity to heal together, to create their own tribe, but then to follow them for the next 2 years and watch how those programs that we put into place and the interventions that we teach them to do, the practices that we help them to engage in when they go back home, how those are improving their lives, and then follow them through that, right? Give them a tribe that they can communicate with so that they have a peer support network of people with shared experience, including us. And then also, really do the research too. So we have an incubator for the ideas that we come together as a group and formulate that will help families, which will help communities, which will help job sites. We get to follow them through and see how that process works. And, luckily we're not the first to think of it. There's Project Sanctuary that did this with military families, and they have peer-reviewed research that shows humongous increases in the sustainability of the family. So I think it's something like 95% didn't experience divorce over the next few years. So what we're really doing is again, I talk about creating a container. We're really building that container so that we can, one, help heal families, right? So we can affect lives in that way, but two, we can build from that research that we do on a small level and then pass that out to companies with those pulse surveys and KPIs that we're testing in real time with the families that we're able to help. So we start to build that positive feedback loop that we can then share with larger and larger circles. Just like Riz, our buddy Josh Rizzo always talks about, right? You start with the 3 feet around you. So, we've done that with the 3 feet around our family, and our kids are participating in bi-weekly Kamochi circles with the other kids that Amy teaches at the micro school. And so now we're ready to grow that circle, and we want to invite those families in so that we can share what we've learned.
Oh, that's fantastic. By the way, if a family wants to have they already been selected, or if a family wants to apply to do this, how would they? I don't know what. Honestly, and it's not a loaded question. I truly have no idea. How somebody? Did you already choose the 10 families, and are they a specific, socioeconomic group, or is it how have the families been chosen, or haven't they yet?
Well, they have not been chosen yet. And so if you go to our website, which is just getbuilt.org, if you go to the family retreat section, there is an opportunity to either self nominate or nominate another family that that has experienced, it doesn't have to be trauma, right? Like, I think trauma can be whatever, hard times, been away from each other for a long time. I think the families that are best suited for what we're talking about maybe they're not in the midst of the darkest times, but they're coming out of it, so they're ready to start putting into practice the things that we want to share with them. And so, yeah, we have a nomination process, we'll have a selection process, and so you can go to getbuilt.org right now and nominate yourself or a family that you're aware of that would benefit from a 5-day retreat that's professionally led, and really, and give yourself an opportunity to heal, or give that family that you know of an opportunity to heal. And there's sponsorship opportunities there as well. So all of the information that you need is available on the website.
Yeah, and I'll say that one of the things that I've really appreciated is that you're not making these, often these things are only available to people who can afford it. And the fact that we're helping raise capital, the help that we're making awareness of this. I have a couple of very dear friends who have been affected. I think everybody has somebody in their lives that's been affected by suicide and or mental health. And, these sponsorship opportunities for people, unfortunately, the ones who need it most generally are the ones who cannot afford it. And that's not always the case, but it's very often the case. And so, being able to offer that to people without charge is a really special thing, and not a small endeavor either. So on
No.
the yeah, no, and I recognize that, and I appreciate. I mean, you've dedicated so much time and energy and effort to this, and I really admire that. I really do. So. And by the way, I am enjoying watching your puppies kind of roll around, adjusting themselves. I'm like, if I ever come back, I want to be Josh's dog because they look like they are they're better treated than anybody I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's Freya and Enzo back there, and yeah, they definitely rule the roost.
Yeah, I get that. Believe me, I got one of those myself, Sunshine. She is a princess, no question about it. So going and I want to dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that you've seen, because again, we want to do it from a practical perspective in the health and safety environment. What have you seen people are doing, practices that are being done well, and some of the not only interventions, but also some of the risks and concerns that organizations have on how to deal with and how to address? You see somebody in crisis, how to handle that. I know you've been trained on it, but a lot of organizations will see somebody, they understand they're going through, obviously that person's going through something, but what should they do? What shouldn't they do? And kind of how an organization should look at this type of a thing. Can you give me a lens for that?
for me, as a construction leader, and diving into, recognizing that there was a crisis, knowing that something needed to be done, and being terrified to get involved, because one of the things that made it most difficult, the biggest level of friction that I had, was, what if I do the wrong thing? Right? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't say the right thing, and this person goes and hurts themselves because I screwed it up? And so there was a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation in me about getting involved. And I can remember sitting with the first young man that I did an intervention with. He was an iron worker. He was up on the job site. Uh, he was a veteran, was in a really tough unit in Afghanistan, and 23 people within his unit had died by suicide since he had returned. And the day before, he had just found out that another buddy of his in San Diego had died by suicide. And, he's up there climbing around 100 feet in the air, and really struggling. Luckily, his brother was the foreman on the crew and reached out to the GC superintendent. GC superintendent reached out to me because at that point in time, I had become the suicide guy on the site. And so when people, were looking for someone to help out, they would call me. So I met with him, sat him down, and I can remember sitting next to him and being absolutely terrified that I was going to say the wrong thing. And so in that moment, I realized that all I really have is the ability to listen, and possibly talk about, when I've been struggling, or open up that container again, be a little vulnerable, say, man, I really struggled. I was I lived with suicidal ideation for 20 years, and I know where you're coming from, or I know what that feels like. Talk to me about what's going on. And so he started talking about, losing all of his buddies from the army, and what had happened the day before, and how he was feeling. And then, every single intervention that I've done, and like I said, a couple dozen now, every single one of them, there has been a stressor from the family lens. So disconnection. And what we know about suicidality is that it's always, or not almost, it's almost always a combination of a loss of hope and a lack of connection. And those two things coming together create some sort of reaction in our brains that say, hey, it's just not worth doing this anymore. And so for him, his girlfriend was moving out. He hadn't talked to his kids in a few weeks. And then he got the news that they had lost someone. So really, all it took was for me to say, hey, I'm here to listen. Let's offload that. And then before we get away from each other, before you leave here, we're going to have a plan. And so we called his EAP, or what I thought was the EAP. That didn't necessarily work because he was a traveler.
EAP.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. EAP. So that's the Employee Assistance Program. You may also hear it called an MAP, which is a member assistance program, which would be like for your unions. So the EAPs and MAPs are the thing that CEOs put into place that maybe only 2% of the workforce actually utilize. But it is something that is available. So they can reach out, they can get like 9 free appointments with a therapist to help them work through a crisis situation. And those are increasing in visibility, and I think increasing in quality. You just want to make sure that yours is one that you could actually use. So, as a leader, call the EAP, see what it's like to actually go through the process of getting those free appointments. I mean, it's as simple as that. But anyway, got to the EAP, that didn't work. Tried to call his local, that didn't work. So then we called the VA, got him an appointment that day, went down there, got help. And I can say to this day, he's doing fantastic. He's switched careers. He's a welder now. He's back on the job site. He's rekindled his relationships with his family. And but for me, there were weeks there where I would wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh my gosh, I wonder how he's doing. I hope he's okay.
Sure, of course.
That's all we can do, right? We can't control what happens to folks afterwards. And I had to get real with the fact that I'm not their savior. I'm not the one that's going to save them. I'm All I can do is what I can do in that moment, and then the rest of it is up to them. And so, as leadership, really what we can do is we can set systems in place that allow for peer support. So we can create peer support containers, right? We can have advocates on our job sites that are trained. So whether that's QPR training or vital cog or mental health first aid, get your folks trained up. Don't just put it on all on your safety people, right? So the safety folks have plenty to do. Don't just make them now the mental health advocates. You got to have people that are superintendents. You got to have people that are vice presidents. You got to have people throughout the organization that are ready to do this work, because it's not just guys in the tools that are experiencing this kind of crisis. It's people in your office. It's construction managers. It's your EHS people. It's everyone across the board that are experiencing this. So as a leader in a company, your responsibility, one, is to start leading with vulnerability. Talk about the fact that you went to therapy, and that's probably why you're in a leadership position, because you figured out how to do the work that it takes. Or talk about the times that you've struggled and your kids have been, hooked on drugs or suicidal or whatever it might be. Tell those stories to people so that they feel safe living life and being humans.
I think that is a very powerful message. By the way, I have no idea. This is, I'm being honest. I don't know through our, through our various employee benefit packages and so forth, if we actually have an EAP program in place. And I say this as somebody who is a big believer in therapy, a big believer in advocacy for being, if you're not good at home, if you're not good in your heart and your head, you're never going to be good for your customer. You're not going to be good for your team. And so, but yet, even somebody who focuses on this as much as I possibly can, I don't even know if we have an official program together. I do know we have very good benefits, but I'm going to find out, because you bring up a really interesting and good point. I know we have dental and eyes and medical, and we have a medical savings plan. We have all these things, but you talk about mental health and what to do for in a crisis environment, and does it cost something, and do you have these things? I honestly don't know. So it's I'm going to find out, though. So thank you for bringing that up, and I hope anybody who's listening here will also ask themselves this question, because I think it's really important. And pressure comes from all sorts of sides. There's no welder or electrician versus a CEO or a board member. We all feel pressure. We all have responsibilities. We all feel less than at times, and desperate at times, and elated and ecstatic at times. We're all humans. And so I think it's really important to talk about those types of things. And thank you again. I love the fact that we're having this conversation, and it is very much unusual for this podcast, by the way. We talk a lot about EHS and safety and things like that, but you're right. Organizations do put this on the EHS leadership as a, and it's not a bad thing, but I do ask myself, even when you were going through your training your internal people, I can hear our attorneys right now in the back of my head saying, okay, what is the liability that is associated with this? Like, what is the risk of your fear being true? Josh goes and has this conversation with somebody that was already far too gone. And unfortunately, they do something that nobody wants them to do. And you have to say you did your best. And I respect and appreciate that. And that's part of the journey. And it's hard. I can only imagine, like anything else, you teach somebody how to drive and they go out and they get into an accident. And, you're like, did I teach them wrong? But there's probabilities, right? There's going to be a number. There's a probability that it's not going to go with a small and hopefully even smaller number of these things that don't work well. So what is the story on the company side, on the world of litigation and liability that we all live in? As much as you don't want to talk about that, it's like you want to just say, well, it doesn't matter, do it anyways. But reality is that we all have bosses and stakeholders and shareholders, and you have to be cognizant of this. So what is your stance on that? And what have your companies, like, how have they looked at it?
Yeah, great question. And of course it's top of mind, right? You're trying to run a company, and what I've noticed with CEOs is that they recognize that there's a need, and then they're also scared that doing too much will put them at risk, right? And they have the responsibility of all the people that they employ and those families to think about as well. And so it's a difficult position to be in, as a company leader. You have to weigh what's going to be best for the greatest amount of people, and a lot of times you have to make decisions that are hard. One of the things that luckily we have from a legality standpoint is, we're not asking people to become therapists. We're not asking people to become professionals. We want to refer people to the professionals. And so having a conversation with someone does not put you at risk legally, right? Like if you and I talk about it and I mention that I'm in crisis, and you say, hey, you know what? Here, I know 3 places that you can go. I could sue you, right? Anyone in America can sue anyone for anything. But, luckily, just like if you're performing CPR on someone, and God forbid they break their rib and they come back and sue you for it, you're protected by state law that would not, it wouldn't leave you open to a lawsuit for that. It's the same when it comes to mental health crisis. And so those laws do protect people from intervening. Now, if you go in and you say, hey, I'm the guy that's going to save you, and just listen to my advice, and you're advising them on their mental health, then that does open you up to problems. But I never ever would want that responsibility. First of all, I'm going to leave that to people that have, dedicated their lives to training for that sort of thing. I just want to be the person that helps shepherd someone that's in crisis to the right people, because I can remember what it was like to be, beside myself, not knowing where to turn, not willing to ask for help, and then finding those people that were saying, hey, you know what, we've got you, it's okay. We don't know the answer, but we do know the people that can help you find it. And it's a process, so I think as companies, one of the ways that you can make sure that you're being clear about your intention is that, hey, we're not here to solve your problems. We just know that they exist and that they're real, and we have these resources available for you when they come up, because they're going to.
That's fantastic. So along those lines, is there, obviously, we're not going to be making others into therapists. We're not going to go and take the superintendents or somebody on each site and make them an expert on the medical process, nor do we want to. Is there a class or a process or a license or a certification or something that is kind of a nationally recognized? First step would be to get this type of training so that you are somebody who is prepared, at least prepared as well as anybody can be to do this kind of work.
Yeah, there's a number of trainings that are available. I don't necessarily want to endorse any one over another at this point in time. What I would suggest for the listeners of the Canary Report is give me a call or shoot me an email, and then let me know where you're at, like what it is that you're looking for, and I can help to find those. There's, like I said, I've taken a ton of them, right? Vital Cog, QPR training, mental health first aid, 4x4. There's a lot of trainings out there. I don't necessarily want to endorse one over another, but I think you have to figure out exactly, what your strategic plan is, who you're trying to train, and then what one works best for them. And so I'm happy to offer, free of charge, of course, advice to anybody who's looking to do that for their people. I would love to help them find the right program, because, obviously my mission in life is to help people, and I can help more people by helping companies help all their people.
It's funny. That offer is very, very generous, and I hope that people who are listening will look you up and will reach out to you on that, because I think it's a really important subject to. And I appreciate you also not advocating for one or the other. We're not here to do an advertisement. We're here to do the work, and part of the work is what program is best. Probably is subject to where you are. Right? It's like everything else. Somebody says, I need to go to driver training school, and then you find out that they want to be a long haul trucker. Well, I'm not gonna put you into, my kid's 16-year-old class, right? You need to go and do a CDL training, commercial driver's license. That being said, one of the things I've always felt was an opportunity for Yellowbird would be to add these mental health training programs and or people who could empower others to become trained on how to do this type of thing on the platform. We currently don't do that, and I'm not sure if we're quite ready to do that as an organization. We're doing very, very specific things. But the power of being able to have a dispersed train the trainer, train the team kind of a program in mental health, and somehow at least empower people to be able to address the what to do, what not to do, how to add liability, how not add liability, how to at least get them to the people who can really serve them. I think it would be a powerful offering. I'm not saying we're going to do it necessarily right away, but I think that the network, because of the power of what we've built, could be really, really interesting to pursue at some point. So you and I might be doing that at a future date.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
I think what we'll do in closing here is I want to make sure that, so it's get built, GET built, exactly like it sounds.org. If anybody wants to learn more. You also personally, you do speaking engagements and keynotes. You can serve. This is how you actually make a living and have the ability to do this kind of work. Because most of what you do, you don't get paid for, and that's why it's so important that people contribute and help you get this done. If somebody wants to have you come out and do a training or do a class or do one of your keynotes, I know you have a number of programs. How do they find you specifically that's not on the Get Built side? What's the best way to reach out to you for, the Josh Vitale services that you offer as a person who is a great speaker and has a lot of wisdom to share?
And thanks. Yeah. So I have a link tree. If you want, we can drop it in with the podcast. But yeah. So LinkedIn is also a great place to find me, Joshua Vitale. I write some articles and things that might be informative to your listeners, and then you can find me through there. So I'll share my link tree, which will get you an appointment, right? So you can schedule a call, you can book an appointment, and then find out more about what I do on an individual level. And then it also has links to Built and to Construction Suicide Prevention Week there. And that way, you can kind of funnel through there and go where you want. But yeah, that should all be available through that link tree.
That's fantastic. And I need to give a little bit of a personal story here. I have, gone through a journey while at Yellowbird, both emotionally, mentally, financially. As we've built this company, we've gone through ups and downs. We've had challenges on a number of different areas. We've also had wonderful successes in areas. And as a human being, Josh is a person that has always been there to just talk and actually care about who we are as individuals, and how is my family dealing with this? How's this affecting your children, your home life? And I want to acknowledge that I actually have gotten into therapy myself to help me process some of the implications of these things as you go through. And we all have our scars. We all have our things. There's nobody who gets out of this game without having a history of ups and downs. And I just want to thank you, because candidly, without you, I don't think I would have been willing to acknowledge how okay it is, how important it is, and how I'm not embarrassed to make that statement, very publicly. Because in the seat I sit in, particularly hosting people and doing these things, I'm supposed to have it all together. Reality is nobody has it all together. And I try really hard to be honest about that now. There's a long time that I wasn't. And that, of course, I understand what I'm doing. I know the plan through and through, all the way through. It's like, nope, I don't. And but I do know what I don't know, and I do know when I'm under an immense amount of pressure. And people like you, and I've got board members and other people who have really been there to be an ear. And so I thank you for that. And we're going to put your link tree into the episode. And if I can ask our listeners, one, if you're an organization that would be willing to participate in the program that getbuilt.org is putting together, please go find out about it. If you've ever been impacted by a mental health challenge, please go. And if you can donate, I would appreciate it, because we really do want to sponsor as many families as we can. And it's not inexpensive, but it's so life-changing. So I thank you, Josh. I thank Amy for all she does as well, and your family. And we'll see you next time. So thanks again.
Oh man, glad to be here. I appreciate you, buddy. Love you, man.
Yeah, love you too, man. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.